Sometimes, when the fog rolls down from the Arbor Mountain and settles in the valleys of the Bavarian forest, I can convince myself I am still a young man. I can almost feel the rough bark of a spruce against my shoulder, the damp chill of moss seeping through my trousers, the silence so profound you can hear a beetle navigating a dry leaf. In those moments I am Klaus the hunter, the trapper, the man who knows the woods better than he knows his own heart. I am waiting for a stag or perhaps a boar, my breath held in a cloud of white vapor, my world open and infinite and free. But memory is a traitor. It seduces you with the scent of pine resin and wet earth, only to lock you back inside the steel box. The smell changes first. The pine vanishes, replaced by the reek of hot oil, stale sweat, and the metallic tang of recycled fear. The open sky is gone, traded for a ceiling of painted steel mere inches above my head. The silence is shattered not by a snapping twig, but by the low, idling growl of a Maybach engine, a vibration that rattles the fillings in your teeth and turns your bones to jelly. I am not in the forest. I am in the belly of a Panzer IV, hull number 622, sitting on the northern edge of the Kursk salient. It is July 1943, or maybe it is August. The dates have blurred into a gray smear over the decades, but the feeling, the crushing weight of the armor plate remains as sharp as a skinning knife. We called them iron horses, but that was propaganda rot. A horse breathes. A horse has fear you can soothe. This thing was a coffin waiting for the nails. I was 24, old enough to know better, young enough to hope, sitting in the gunner's seat, my knees pressed against the recoil guard of the 75 WW2. To my left, the commander, Unteroffizier Weber, stood with his head out of the cupola, seeking a breeze that didn't exist. To my right, the loader, a boy named Hans who had barely started shaving, picked at a scab on his knuckle, his eyes fixed on the breech block as if it were a religious icon. I tried to apply the logic of the woods to this war. That was my first mistake. In the forest, survival is about senses. You smell the rain before it falls. You see the shift in shadow that betrays the fox. You are the predator. But inside the tank, you are blind. You are deaf. You are a nose-less cripple. The vision block is a narrow slice of thick glass, smeared with dust and grease, offering a view of the world that is distorted and green-tinted. You cannot smell the enemy. You cannot hear their approach over the roar of your own engine. You are not the hunter. You are the bait in a trap made of 20 tons of steel, rolling loudly through a valley of guns. Richter Weber's voice came through the throat microphone, tinny and distorted in my headset. Check the traverse again. I didn't answer. I just gripped the hand wheel. My palms were slick. The turret whined, a hydraulic groan that sounded like a dying animal as I spun it 10 degrees left, then back to center. It was smooth, but heavy. Everything in Russia was heavy. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of unwashed bodies. We had been sitting in this assembly area for 6 hours, waiting for the sun, waiting for the order. Operation Citadel. The Grand Pincer. The generals spoke of it like a chess move. We thought of it as a meat grinder. My greatest fear wasn't dying. A bullet in the brain is quick. It's like a light switch. No, my fear was the fire. We all knew what happened when a shaped charge punched through the ammunition rack. The brew up. The steel walls turn white hot in seconds. The hatches jam. You can hear your friends screaming, but you can't help them because your own skin is bubbling like wax. I looked at the escape hatch in the floor, covered by a crate of extra machine gun belts. I wanted to move the crate. I wanted to kick it away so I could claw at the bolts, but I didn't move. I sat frozen, staring at the brass casings of the main gun rounds, shining dully in the gloom. They looked beautiful and malignant, like golden vipers coiled in their racks. I closed my eyes and tried to summon the forest again. I tried to imagine the track of a hare in the snow, the specific geometric pattern of its prints. But the image wouldn't hold. The heat in the turret was rising, a suffocating blanket. The fuel gauge needle flickered, dipping slightly as the engine idled, drinking our lifeblood before we had even moved. Any movement, Hans whispered. He wasn't supposed to talk on the internal loop unless it was combat relevant, but Weber didn't reprimand him. "Nothing," I said, "just the dark." But it wasn't just the dark. It was the waiting. The silence of thousands of men and machines holding their breath. It felt wrong. In nature, silence before a storm is heavy. Expectant. This silence was industrial. It was the silence of a factory floor before the whistle blows. I felt a desperate, clawing prayer rise in my throat, a wish for rain, for a breakdown, for a delay. Then, the static in my ears resolved into a voice. It wasn't God. It was the regimental frequency. The tone was flat, bored, terrifyingly casual. The words were a physical blow. The engine roared as the driver revved it, the vibration turning from a purr to a snarl. The hull lurched forward with a violence that snapped my head back against the pad. The tracks shrieked as they bit into the Russian soil, grinding stones to dust. We were moving. The coffin was rolling toward the grave, and the lid was nailed shut. "They're moving." Klaus, no, I wasn't a tanker. I wasn't a number in a division. I was a trapper, and a trapper doesn't get caught in his own snare. I braced my back against the gun breech and drove both feet into the hatch lever with every ounce of hysterical strength left in my starving muscles. I screamed, a raw animal sound that tore my throat. The steel groaned. The latch sheared. The heavy door swung open, and gray daylight flooded in. Beautiful and cold. I shoved the gunner out. He tumbled onto the tracks like a sack of grain. I didn't look back at Weber. I couldn't. His screams had changed, turning into a high, bubbling wail that I still hear when the house is quiet. I scrambled through the opening, scraping my ribs raw, my hands searing on the hot metal of the hull. I fell. The ground was hard and smelled of dry grass. I grabbed the gunner's belt and dragged him, crawling on my belly, clawing at the dirt, putting distance between us and the dying beast. 5 meters. Then the earth shuddered. The ammunition cooked off. The turret of our Panzer didn't just pop. It disintegrated in a column of vertical violence. The blast wave picked us up and threw us into a furrow of the plowed earth. A piece of the drive sprocket, heavy as a man, slammed into the ground where my head had been a second before. I lay there facing the dirt, gasping for air that didn't taste like burning rubber. The ringing in my ears slowly faded, replaced by the crackle of the inferno behind me and the distant, flat chatter of Soviet machine guns. We were alive, but we were alone. The offensive had rolled on or been broken. We were behind the lines. I sat up and looked at the burning wreck. It was a funeral pyre. Weber was in there. The radio, the optics, the powerful engine, all the marvels of German engineering were just twisted scrap melting in the heat. I stripped off my headset and threw it into the wheat. I unbuttoned my tunic, tearing off the collar tabs. I wasn't a crewman anymore. The tank was dead. The soldier was dead. I looked at the sun low in the west. I looked at the tree line, a dark smudge against the horizon. "Get up," I whispered to the gunner. He looked at me with vacant, shock-widened eyes. "Get up, we are leaving." The walk back was not a military retreat. It was a hunt. For 3 days we moved through the Russian wilderness. We had no map, no compass, and no water canteen. But I didn't need them. The Wehrmacht had trained me to drive a 30-ton fortress, to read gauges and calculate ballistics. But the Bavarian forest had trained me to survive. We moved only at night. The Russian steppe is vast, but the gullies and the wooded belts are a maze if you know how to read them. I took the lead. My eyes, so often praised by my commanders for spotting anti-tank guns at 2 kilometers, now scanned for broken twigs, for the unnatural silence of a waiting sentry, for the faint glimmer of starlight on a rifle barrel. The gunner wanted to walk on the road. He wanted to find a farmhouse. I had to strike him once, hard across the face, to make him listen. "The road is death," I told him. "The farm is death. We are wolves now. We stay in the shadows." I found water in a muddy depression under the roots of a birch tree, filtering it through my shirt. I caught a hedgehog on the second night, skinning it with my bayonet in the dark, my hands moving by memory. We ate it raw, chewing quietly, eyes darting around the clearing. It tasted of blood and earth, but it was strength. We were ghosts. We watched a Soviet convoy rattle past, headlights cutting the gloom, soldiers laughing and smoking on the back of trucks. We lay in the ditch, covered in dead leaves, not breathing. I could smell their tobacco. I could smell the grease on their axles. I felt no fear, only a cold, predatory focus. In the tank, I was blind. Here in the dirt, I saw everything. On the morning of the fourth day, the wind changed. I smelled it before I heard it. Synthetic, gasoline, German coffee. We broke the tree line and stumbled into the perimeter of a grenadier regiment. A sentry challenged us, his Kar 98 leveled at my chest. I didn't raise my hands. I just looked at him. I was covered in soot, dried blood, and mud. My eyes were sunken, dark pits in a skeletal face. I must have looked like a demon rising from the earth. "Identify," he shouted, his voice shaking. I didn't give him my rank. I didn't give him my unit. I just pointed back toward the east, toward the smoke still rising on the horizon. "I am the one who walked out," I croaked. "That was 50 years ago. I sit here now in the shadow of the Grosser Arbor. The wind moves through the spruce trees, a sound like the ocean, like the rush of air before a shell lands. I run my hand over the rough bark of a pine. It is cool, solid, alive. It is not steel. I do not own a car. I cannot ride in elevators. If I am in a room with the door closed, I can feel the heat rising. I can smell the hydraulic fluid. I sleep with the window open, even in deepest winter, when the snow drifts in onto the floorboards. I need to know there is a way out. I need to know I am not in the box. They gave me a medal for bringing the gunner back. They told me I was a hero of the Panzer IV. They put me in another tank, a Panther this time. Better armor, bigger gun. It didn't matter. I was never in the tank again. My body was there loading shells, turning cranks, but my spirit stayed outside, running in the tree line, watching from the dark. The machine is a lie. That is what I learned in the fire. I look at the young men today, staring at their screens, trusting their technology to save them, to tell them who they are. They are locking themselves in boxes. In the tank, I was part of the mechanism. My eyes were its eyes, my hands its weapon. When the machine died, I was supposed to die. But underneath the steel and the uniform, I was still a hunter from the forest, and the forest knows how to survive. They teach you to fight for the flag, for the fatherland. But in the end, you fight with what you are. You must remember what you are, before they tell you what to be. This memory is a shard of glass I carry. Help me pull it out. Subscribe to keep this history alive.